Hi everyone, it's Koinzell here. So today I'm going to do a very detailed guide on Hu Tao. This is pre-release by the way, so it's still very subject to change. But I can easily update the figures again based on whatever changes that are done to her kit, as long as it's not too major. So first off, let's talk about the Hu Tao elemental skill and some of her base stats first. So base stats wise, Hu Tao has really high base HP, as you can see from both the level 80 and the level 90. But her base attack is absolutely horrendous. It's actually very low. For reference, right, a typical 4-star character will have a range of 220 to 250 attack at level 19. She just only has 106. So it's very obvious what MiHoYo wants you to do. MiHoYo wants you to break away from the typical attack percent based kind of builds to go HP based. So we'll talk more about that, how it works. On top of that, she also has crit damage as her Ascension stat. That's really nice. You can get up to 88.4%, which is a bonus 38.4% crit damage at level 90. Okay. Elemental skill Guide to Afterlife. This is the skill that makes her so broken and insane, because it increases her attack based on her max HP. Max HP, okay? Not current HP. Max HP. So the attack bonus gain this way cannot exceed 400%. So there's a hard cap of 400% of her base attack. Now her base attack is not just this value here. It includes the weapon's base attack. Okay, so take for example, if you use something like a 5-star weapon like Homa, your base attack is going to be something like 714. Okay, and on top of that, her attack damage is converted to Pyro throughout the whole duration of 8 seconds. Throughout the duration of 8 seconds over here. Sorry, 9 seconds. 8 seconds is the Blood Blossom duration. 9 seconds is the actual stance or state duration of this Paramita Papilio. There's a cooldown of 16 seconds. So how she works is really about swapping her in and out. Swapping her in when her skill is ready to deal a lot of damage. You might think that the Blood Blossom damage scaling is not good, so this is not a skill to level up. But in actual fact, the most important thing is actually her attack increase here. 5.06% max HP and 5.96% max HP. And then you have the next important tier, which is 6.85% max HP, the highest level you can get without using Crown plus Constellation Tree of Hu Tao. This is the max level you can get without using Crown at C0. And then you have level 6 without using any of the boss talent materials. Talent materials dropped by bosses, the 16 Resin bosses. But this is not a good value to stop at, and once you see all the numbers that I have crunched through, you understand why I say that. Okay, now the next thing to do is, for this video, I'll mainly be looking at these 3 weapons, because they are the ones that people will look at when you come to using a 4-star weapon for DPS, for a Pyro character anyway. I didn't include Crescent Pike, because Crescent Pike is more for a physical character, and she has Pyro damage throughout the whole duration of her elemental skill E, so it doesn't make sense to use Crescent Pike on her in my opinion. Okay, before I go into permutating through the 4-star weapons, I will first talk about attack versus HP sense, because I think some people may still think that attack sense is better than HP sense for Hu Tao. It's not the case, because her base attack is really low. Okay, DM here stands for Deathmatch. This is the Battle Pass Spear. This is Blackcliff pole, the one that you can buy from the shop, the Genshin Impact shop. This is Lithic Spear, which is the new spear that gives you increased stats of attack and crit rate based on the number of Liyue characters you have in your composition. So 4 Liyue characters give you max stats. Then you have Staff of Homa, basically the weapon that's made for her, the weapon that's going to come to us in 1 week's time, 1 week ahead of Hu Tao. Now for Hu Tao, there is no actual indication of when she's coming, but basically everyone is predicting that she will come on either 2nd of March or 3rd of March. Okay, so that's 2 weeks from now. 2 weeks from now. Okay, so these are the values for character level 18. C here stands for character, so character level 18. Weapon level 18, you have these base attack values. This is Hu Tao's base attack based on adding the weapons base attack together with the character base attack. That is how base attack for a character is calculated in Genshin Impact when it comes to attack percentage. Okay, now for character level 19, you have these values here along with the level 90 of the weapon. So you'll see that Deathmatch has the lowest, Blackcliff is next, then you have Lithic which is the highest, and amongst the 4-star weapons then you have Homa. So if I look through the stats itself, if I compare, a 46.6% attack sense will give you this amount of attack value based on the permutation here, whether your character level is 80 or whether your weapon level is 18, or all the way up to character level 19 and weapon level 19. Okay. Now these are the skill level. This is the attack percentage that you get from her max HPs. This is the attack boost basically that you get. So if I purely look at the skill level 6, 9, and 12, just 6 alone outdoes every of the attack value here. At character level 18, you have this value. Character level 19, you have these values. Why? Because the base HP is increased when you increase from character 80 to 90. Likewise, the higher your skill level, the more attack buff that you get from using a HP sense as opposed to an attack percentage sense. So I hope this leaves no doubt that HP sense is definitely the best sense to use compared to the 46.6% attack sense. Okay, and if you're using Homa, you get even an additional attack effect based on the Homa's attack based on max HP effect. So R1 Homa, you get 58. R1 Homa, you get less than 50%. If I talk about R5, it will be even more, right? Double the value basically. So HP percentage is really important and really gives a lot more attack than sense when you are using Hu Tao's E, which is the duration with which you should be using Hu Tao, right? So what this means is that attack percent can only be better than HP percent if the 400% attack cap is already achieved. Okay, so 400% cap already achieved, meaning that there's two possibilities for this to happen. One is that you're using a low enough attack weapon like Deathmatch so that the HP requirement is not so high. You are able to achieve this without using a HP sense. Otherwise, for most weapons, it's going to be very hard to achieve this. Okay? So, I'm sorry, I mean to achieve this. So attack percent is really only better than HP percent in such a scenario. Number 2 scenario would be, let's say you are able to find a CR or CD headpiece with the right upgrades, and your CR is already at 50% from subsets, then you can consider using attack percent. No matter what, it's still better than a HP, right? Provided, again, you have already achieved a 400% attack cap. There's another way to do this, which is if you want to rely on Rosara's 15% CR buff in future, because that's how she works, right? She can give a 50% crit rate buff to the team members based on certain conditions. You can rely on that and try to use attack percent instead of getting a CR headpiece, for example. So this is talking about headpiece really. But generally speaking, the most important point is this, that attack percent is only better than HP percent if the 400% attack cap is already achieved. Otherwise, your HP sense or HP, even HP headpiece will always be better than attack percent. Alright, so let's get this first fact out of the way first. So you'll see why in my weapon comparisons, I don't talk about attack or HP sense at all. I only talk about HP sense all the way. The only permutation is between crit damage, crit damage or crit rate or HP percentage headpiece. Okay, so first off, I am just going to quickly run through the stats, how we come to all the different values, the assumptions that we take. So if you are not interested in all these, right, you can actually skip to the direct conclusions for the weapons. But I would suggest to just bear with me, listen to me explain to all this so that you will understand how we come to the conclusions and some of the things that I will refer to during the conclusion as well. Alright. Okay, so base attack and base HP, all of these I already covered earlier when we talk about the attack versus HP sense. Now, Deathmatch, these are the stats for Deathmatch. You have base attack 401, you have base attack 454 at level 19, crit rate 33.5, crit rate 36.8. And then you have the weapon refinement effect. So I'm not going to really go through all of these. All of these have been factored for in my calculations. Basically, Deathmatch effect, most of the time you will be able to get the less than 2 opponents nearby when it's a 1-on-1 situation. If it's not 1-on-1, then you will get this. So the less than 2 opponents nearby, the attack buff is 24% instead of 16%, while for 32, this R5 effect is 48% instead of 32%. Now, character level, let's say we say it's a character level 80 and weapon level 80. This is the base attack, this is the base HP. This is the total max HP that you need to achieve in order to get a max attack buff when your skill level is 6. When your skill level is 9, you'll see that it's much more forgiving. You only need you need 6k HP lesser, which is about 33k. And then you have this at level 12, which is basically the C3 effect. This is at 28.9k, about 29k HP. Yeah. This is the HP percentage required in total. This is from the artifacts, what you need on the artifacts. Including the main stat. This is here, you may see that the value is the same because Deathmatch doesn't offer you any HP percentage, right? In fact, the only weapon that gives you HP percentage is Homa, and the other one will be a 3-star weapon, Black Tesser, which I will briefly mention later towards the final conclusion. Okay, so some of the assumptions that I've taken is that average number of artifact upgrades across the 5 artifacts, I'll take it that is 22. You typically will be able to get ranging from 20 to 25, depending on whether your artifact came with 3 stats or 4 stats. Right? This is quite basic math, not much to talk about. I'll just take the average of the 4 values. For each of these stats, there are 4 values that you can get when you upgrade it or you roll it. So I'll just take the average. These are not actual values. This is more like the middle of the 4 values. So it's really just average for us to have an easier calculation. So HP percentage, stat average 5%, crit rate is 3.3, attack percent is 5%, crit damage is 6.5%. The goblet or cup main stat will always be pyro, because you cannot afford to sacrifice pyro damage in exchange for HP or attack percent. Yeah, alright, so you'll see here I have a artifacts build where we talk about the what are the sense that we use. So like I mentioned, it's all HP, because I already covered that in the attack versus HP sense portion. Headpiece wise, there are 3 options. There's main stat HP, main stat crit rate, and main stat crit damage, right? So you see here, this is at plus 20, this is also plus 20, this is also plus 20, okay? And here you have just a way for me to help calculate and make sure that the upgrades are all correct. This is the number of possible percentage base rolls that you have. When you're using 2 main stat HP percentage equipment, obviously you can't get HP percentage on these 2. So that's why your number of possible HP percentage base rolls is 3. So that is how it works for this. Likewise for CRCD. Now, the important thing I want to bring you guys to is really this here, the values here. These are the crit rate, HP percentage, and crit damage you need from the substats on the artifacts. So substats meaning the 4 stats that you see when you click on your artifact, not the main stat itself. Main stat is already covered here. And this is across all 5 artifacts. Attack percent, we just put a 25% here. It's not required. I'm just putting it as a guesstimate. These values here, these 3 values here are the important ones to refer to. And these values are obtained by assuming that we are hitting 155% crit damage across all the 4-star weapons that we will compare, which is the 3: Deathmatch, Blackcliff Pole, and Lithic Spear. Okay, crit damage 155 is actually that's derived from the crit damage 88.4% that Hu Tao has at level 90, plus a crit damage helmet that gives you 66.2%. So more or less, that is how we come up with the figure. Of course, it's rounded up by a little bit, but yeah, let's just say 155 is the target that we want to go to for easier base reference and comparison across the weapons. Crit rate wise, we are going for a 50% here. Obviously, we can go higher, which is 80%, and I'll talk about that later. But basically, you have a 50% CR target and an 80% CR target that we are trying to permutate through. Artifact substats here. You have level 6, level 9, and level 12. Along with the different permutation of whether you are using HP together with crit damage or HP with HP. For Deathmatch, the subset is crit rate. That's why we will use crit damage Headpiece as a comparison instead of CR Headpiece. CR Headpiece, however, is still being used for comparison when you are trying to hit 80% CR target. I'm not using it on the 50% CR target because if you calculate, I will definitely get more than 50% CR if I use a 31.1% CR Headpiece along with a level 90 Deathmatch that already gives us 36.8%, right? So that's why it's not being calculated or compared here. Now, if you look at this, it might be harder to make sense of the figures, right? So that's why I have broken them down further into artifact upgrades. This means the number of upgrades that you need to do. So if I look at level 9 here, if I'm using double HP Headpiece, double HP percentage means stack gear, I actually don't need any upgrades on my CR or my HP percentage, even though I need a small amount here, because I'm assuming HP percentage, attack percentage, CR percentage, and CD percent base roll present on all possible artifacts, i.e. this is like the 100% perfect scenario. Obviously, that is very, very difficult, but this assumption is made for us to easier, how should I put it, to compute it in an easier manner so that we can all appreciate it better. Okay, so obviously, if you didn't get, say, a attack percent base roll on one of your artifacts, just add a attack percent to here, right? That's all that is required. Likewise for HP percentage and CR. Okay, but what I want to say here is that when you look at using a Deathmatch weapon itself with double HP stats, you don't even need to try to get any HP percentage on your artifact upgrades, provided that you have already the base HP percentage present on all. Likewise for crit rate, you only need 7 crit damage upgrades, meaning that when you upgrade your artifact, you just need 7 of them to go into crit damage, which is fairly doable because that is like 33% of your artifact upgrades you want them to go into crit damage. Still quite easy, unless you are really unlucky and most of them go to like defense, elemental mastery, flat attack. But we all know that that happens, right? That's how true the artifact upgrade system is. Okay, so that being the case, you'll see that Deathmatch is the easiest weapon to achieve this, right? You have so many these green values here represent the number of flexible upgrades that you have. Flexible meaning that they can go into any other place since we have already achieved the target that we want to. 50% CR target, 155% crit damage, as well as the max attack cap buff, as you can see here. For Deathmatch, the maximum attack boost that you can get from the elemental skill is 1980. Okay, that seems like quite a high figure, but it's actually one of the lowest amongst all the 4-star weapons, and I will show you guys later shortly. So these are how we derive the stats. Okay, this is how you want to understand the stats. In fact, if you look here, when it says only 2 base rolls, only 2 base CD rolls are required when using CD Headpiece. This is because you only need 10% crit damage when you are using a crit damage Headpiece. So this means that in return, without using crit damage, while you are using crit damage Headpiece, it means that you're not using HP Headpiece, right? So that's why the HP percentage requirement is higher. than when you are using double HP. So that's why you need more HP upgrades here. Instead of requiring crit damage upgrades, you need 9 HP upgrades. And why is it that it's 9 and not 7? Is because the base, if you assume base crit damage roll present on the after that, all I need are 2 base crit damage rolls and can hit the 10% that's required. So that is in the gist how we do our calculation here. Okay, and then you have the special effects from the weapons that are different across weapons, but these are all calculated based on the weapon effect. So effectively, this is how we do our math, and this applies across throughout all the different weapons. So now that I've explained the basics of the math itself, as well as the attack versus HP sense portion, let's go into the weapon conclusion itself. Okay, so this is character 80, Deathmatch 80. This is character level 90, Deathmatch 90. So you see some slight differences. The attack is also higher. So I'll just go through the conclusion itself so that it's easier for everyone to appreciate. So first off, Deathmatch has the lowest base attack across the 3 weapons that we're comparing now. Deathmatch versus Blackcliff, Pole versus Lithic Spear. So with the lowest base attack, it means that it's actually easier to hit the lower 400% attack cap, because your attack cap is so low that your base attack is so low that the base attack cap is only 1980. And 1980 means that if you multiply that by the percentage that the skill level gives, it gives, or rather divide, it gives you the amount of max HP required. So it has the lowest requirement, but it also means that Deathmatch has the lowest potential in terms of attack. Because other weapons with higher base attack are going to give you much more attack when you use Hu Tao's elemental skill E. Basically, it's 5 times the attack, if you think about it, because she gets plus 400%, right? So you better get, effectively the buff gives you additional 4 plus 4 times, so total is like 5 times. Deathmatch low HP percentage requirement. Okay, first off, let me just change the music first. This is a bit loud. I find myself struggling to talk sometimes. I know this is a repeat, but yeah, bear with me. So CR versus CD versus HP Headpiece. I think that's a question that everyone has on their mind, right? So that's why I addressed it here as one of the more earlier points. For each of the weapon, I'll talk about this. So Deathmatch low HP percentage requirement due to the lower attack cap makes it easier to get the artifact substats. So actually, either CD or HP Headpiece will actually work for a 50% CR target, while for 80% CR target, CR, CD or HP Headpiece will work as well. So in the end, it depends on which Headpiece RNG decides to give you, right? Decides to bestow upon you. But do note that when you are using a crit damage Headpiece, there is actually a bigger restriction on your rolls, or your upgrades actually, since you have already easily met the 155% target with the crit damage Headpiece, which means that you need a lot more HP percentage upgrades. So what do I mean by this? If you look at this, I need 9 HP percentage upgrades as opposed to 1 and 6 when I'm using double HP at level 9, skill level 9, which means still C0 Hu Tao. Okay, so if you guys have done artifact upgrades, you know that it's much harder to gun for only one stat. Much harder. Say, let's say if you have a perfect roll, HP percentage, attack percentage, CR percent, CD percent on your one artifact, to want it to always go to HP percentage is very difficult. Right? To want it to go to any stat, for example, just one stat is very difficult. In fact, when you're unlucky, when you have 3 good stats and 1 bad stat like a flat defense, for all you know, each of your upgrade just goes to the flat defense, right? So we all know how difficult artifact upgrades are. So that's why I say that it's better. I would say that it's better to use the HP Headpiece. It's seriously better to use the HP Headpiece first, if you are trying to work towards a more relaxed artifact rolls. Okay. But one point to note is that, and on top of that, one more point to note is that if you have C3 Hu Tao, you really don't need to use HP over Headpiece when you're using Deathmatch. Because the Deathmatch attack requirements are so low, or rather the HP percentage requirements are so low, that if you use double HP, if you use the HP Headpiece when you are C3 Hu Tao with a level 12 elemental skill, it's already overkill. You see the percentage you require is minus 13.7, even before considering any base rolls. Okay. So one other thing to note is that when you ascend to level 90, you do get more crit damage, which is why you see the value here is lower than previously. But I am jumping ahead. Let me go back to the conclusion list itself. So CR, to conclude for Deathmatch, I would recommend, if you only have C0 Hu Tao along with the level 9 elemental skill, it's much better to use a HP Headpiece rather than a crit damage Headpiece in terms of doing your rolls. But of course, if you already have a few very well rolled artifacts, then it's really up to you which Headpiece you want to use, which better Headpiece you have, basically. That's the flexibility that Deathmatch allows you due to its low HP percentage requirement from the lower 400% attack cap. Okay, now, like I said, the 400% attack cap on Deathmatch is so low that any skill level, even level 6, is sufficient for you to hit 50% or 80% CR target. But obviously, a higher skill level offers you more leeway in your artifact upgrades. So if I look here, you see this green portion here? This is the leeway that you have. You can have 13 of them going into defense, flat defense, or rather, let's say if you have all these base rolls and 13 of them go into a stat that you do not want, which is any stat other than HP, it's still fine. All you need is 9 to hit the maximum attack cap buff, which, if you notice, is now 2240 when compared to the 1980. This is just from character level 80 to 90, as well as Deathmatch from level 80 to 90. That's the boost that you get. So that brings me to my next point here, where you actually get a boost of about 300, upgrade of about 352 to 372 attack during your E skill, which is actually much better skilling than the traditional attack based characters. And also you get additional 9.6 CD after you ascend to 80/90. So I would say 80 to 90 for Hu Tao is quite good. But I'll conclude it later when we finish comparing the weapons. Now, if you only increase your weapon level to 90 without increasing your character level, the HP percentage requirement will become higher since your base HP is not increased. I personally, because I'm very sure when you guys see this, you will expect that most of this attack buff comes from the weapon level. And you're not wrong, it is the case. But if you only increase your weapon level without increasing your character level, you are making things difficult for yourself because the HP percentage requirement will be higher. That's one thing to note. Okay. Now, so to conclude, right, I would say Deathmatch is actually the most F2P or L2P friendly to set up for Hu Tao. But in return, your highest attack potential for R5, C9 character level 19 and weapon level 90, Deathmatch weapon level 90 is only 3,520 for a 1-on-1 scenario and 3,430 for more than one opponent due to the Deathmatch effect. And we all know that R5 for Deathmatch is not that easy, right? Because you have to wait for the weapon to be available from the Battle Pass. So if I talk about R1 itself, the figures are further reduced by about 100 to 150. Okay, so it's still a very high attack figure, by the way, 3000 plus when you use her E skill. Or consider the fact that you are just using a 4-star weapon like Deathmatch. But I feel that the attack potential can be higher if you use other weapons. And I'll talk about it later, which are the weapons that you should be using in the final conclusion. Let's talk about the next weapon, which is Blackcliff pole. The video actually has gone longer than I wanted, but I'll try to go as fast as possible. Okay, stats wise for the Blackcliff pole, immediately you'll see that there are two columns here that are new. This color coding where it's like light red in color or pink in color. This actually signifies that you are unable to get the max HP, or rather the max 400% attack cap, even with absolutely perfect root artifact upgrades here. Okay, so CR 9 upgrades, HP percentage 13 upgrades, then you have 10 and 12 here, and on top of that, all of these stats must be present just to do this. And you're still not able to get the maximum attack cap. This is for Blackcliff Pole itself. Why? Because the base attack of Blackcliff Pole has increased, right? Thus increasing the HP percentage requirement. And if you look at the 2-ping cells, they are both when you are trying. There are two conditions. The first condition is when you're at level 6, where the HP percentage requirement is way too high because of the low skill level. The other scenario will be at level 9, when you're trying to hit 80% CR target. So this is like more of a very end game, late game state that you're trying to work towards to. If you look at level 9, which is still C0 Hu Tao, so still very F2P / L2P, right? And the 50% CR target is actually very doable, even on Blackcliff Pole itself. You can still hit the max attack cap, which as you can see is C2464, which is higher than the 2240 that the level 19, character level 19 and Deathmatch level 19 can provide to you, because this is character level 19 and weapon level 19 using Blackcliff Pole. Okay, so Blackcliff Pole itself, the max HP you need based on your level, these are the values as such. So let's look at level 9 itself. It's 41.3k. That's actually quite tough to meet. That's actually a very high HP. So that's why you need double HP, Sense, double HP on your main stat for artifacts, Sense and Headpiece. It makes your life easier in terms of the upgrades as well, right? 9 CR and 6 HP percentage upgrades, as opposed to if you use a crit rate Headpiece, it's 14. Okay, so anyway, I am jumping ahead. Let me just jump straight to the conclusion here, which will cover what I just mentioned. So first off, Blackcliff Pole itself has a higher base attack than Deathmatch, so you can reach a higher attack potential. Even without any of its stats, the Blackcliff Pole stats, even at R1, meaning even at R1 itself, it can already match R5 Deathmatch at its best potential, meaning 3.5k attack, which you will see here. This is the attack without any stats, by the way. And it's flat across as long as you can meet the max 400% attack cap. So with the max stats, approximately 200 attack is added, and if you go from R1 to R5, that's another 200 added, so almost hitting 4000 attack on Blackcliff Pole. That's very nice actually. Using a 4-star weapon along with Hu Tao's kit, you can almost hit 4k attack here. That's really good, but of course it's very conditional. The Blackcliff Pole max stats, as you all know, is very conditional. Basically, after defeating an opponent, your attack is increased by 12% for 30 seconds. There's a maximum of 3 stats of this. So you need to keep killing opponents basically. That is how the Blackcliff Pole's effect works. And on top of that, it takes time to build up this effect. So that's why it's really not as reliable. So I'll say a fair estimate is really just to say that it's typically about 3.7k rather than close to 4k. But that's of course a very high level and rough guesstimate. Okay, so the next important thing, CR crit damage versus HP Headpiece, right? I know everyone is interested in this. So Blackcliff Pole provides crit damage as its substat. So the crit damage Headpiece is really not recommended, because you already have 50 to 55% crit damage from the Blackcliff Pole, depending on whether it's level 80 or level 90. You have 88% crit damage on Hu Tao, or 78%, depending again on the character level. So I really don't think that crit damage Headpiece is recommended, and that's why I did not even include it in for a 50% CR target, because you easily exceed it really when you use the crit damage Headpiece, right? So one thing to note is that the artifact rolls and upgrades are more restrictive than Deathmatch, since there is a higher HP percentage requirement. Now one thing to note is that using CR Headpiece is easier initially if your CR substat rolls are horrible. But in terms of hitting the 400% attack cap, using HP Headpiece is better since it allows you to get both CR and HP percent substat upgrades instead of using the CR HPs, which will basically require you to get 14 upgrades of HP percent, which means that almost 2/3 of your artifact upgrades must go into HP percentage. You know how hard that is? Guys, just think about it. Out of all your upgrades across your 5 artifacts, you need 2/3 of them to go into HP percentage, which means that it already takes forever to farm artifact with the base at rolls that you want. On top of getting the correct base rolls, now you need to make sure that most of your artifact upgrades, 2/3 of it, go into only one stat, and that's HP percentage. That's why I actually don't recommend using CR Headpiece alone with the Blackcliff pole crit damage effect. I know for most builds, that's how people will do, right? People will do, oh, okay, I have crit damage on my weapon, so I should use crit rate on my headpiece. I have crit rate on my weapon, then I should use crit damage on my headpiece. But for Hu Tao, it's different, because there's one important stat that you need to work on, which is her HP percentage. So if you go ahead and use a crit rate headpiece, as you can see here, your HP percentage requirement is now 88.5% after using only one HP min stat sense. So 88.5% crit damage will mean that, assuming you have the HP percentage roll on every single upgrade, you will need so much HP percentage upgrade, 14 as you can see here. Here this is much better, 96. Sorry, let me just find a good music. It's not as loud. Actually, all these are quite long. Okay, so essentially, let me just lower the volume first. Okay, so this should be better. Essentially, contrary to the typical kind of common sense that we have in terms of selecting your headpiece, you actually want... Wait, something is wrong with my... Okay, so you actually want the HP headpiece means that, so that you have a much easier life for your artifact upgrades. You just need to get 9 of them and 6 HP percentage here. Okay, I will say that that's easier as opposed to trying to get 14 upgrades to just one stat itself. So that's why when you are going for a 50% CR target on Blackcliff pole and also on Deathmatch, I definitely recommend taking the HP headpiece. Okay. I didn't really want to talk about the 80% CR target, but let's just quickly run through it. For using Blackcliff pole itself, you are actually unable to hit the max attack target, or rather the 400% attack cap, if you are using only skill level 9 and trying to hit 80% CR target. You are unable to hit it even if your rolls are absolutely perfect, meaning all of them go into either crit rate or crit damage, and based on this specific number as well, because the requirement is so high from the substats. And this is with crit rate headpiece, by the way. Because if you're going 80% CR target, generally speaking, you need to use the CR headpiece or CD headpiece, depending on your weapon substat. But the general gist of it is that if you want 80% CR target on the 4-star weapon, you need Hu Tao Constellation 3. Otherwise, it's not. Usually you won't be able to hit the max cap. But that being said, even if you don't hit the max cap, it's still a higher attack value than the previous weapon, Deathmatch, on Blackcliff Pro, don't you realize? Because it's 2385, which is still higher than 2240. So that's why I say Blackcliff Pro has a higher attack potential. That is what we mean by a higher attack potential. Okay, so this actually brings us to the next point, where in terms of skill levels, skill level 6 is too low to hit 400% attack cap on Blackcliff. For 80% CR target, level 9 skill, you are still unable to hit, even if it's absolutely perfect. But even without hitting it, it still matches Deathmatch attack, right? So that's what I just covered. You will need Constellation 3 to achieve 80% CR, 150% crit damage, and also easily higher crit damage, by the way. 155 is just a baseline, but when you're using Blackcliff, it's much easier to hit a higher crit damage than this, based on just the base rolls without needing any additional crit damage upgrades. Now for 80 to 90 for Blackcliff pole itself, you get about 383 to 436 since Blackcliff has a higher base attack. This difference really comes from the Blackcliff. All of it is pretty much the same as the Deathmatch point. I just wanted to show how much more attack you get. So for Deathmatch, right, you get about 350 to 372. For Blackcliff pole, you get 383 to 436. You see the difference is huge at the last one, mainly because of the Blackcliff pole's max stacks effect. Alright, so to conclude for Blackcliff pole, it's easier to hit higher attack with Blackcliff. R1 Blackcliff without stats is equivalent to R5 Deathmatch. And we all know that it's not easy to get R5 Deathmatch, right? I don't think anyone has R5 or about multi-pass, battle pass weapon yet, right? And now you have a comparison here where R1 Blackcliff without any of the stats will actually do as well as R5 Deathmatch. And with the max stats that it has, which is very conditional, you can even go up to almost 4k attack. So I actually think that Blackcliff is a very good option for F2P and L2P players. But of course, in return, artifact upgrades are harder, but I would say it's still manageable compared to the next 4-star weapon, which is the Lithic weapon, the Lithic spear. I mean, it's still doable, right? I mean, you see here, if you go for 50% CR target, you still have a bit of breathing space or flexibility in terms of your artifact upgrades. Even for 80% CR target, but that's for Constellation 3, not really F2P or L2P, right? But I just wanted to include it so that you guys can see how it works. Now, if I go to Lithic itself, for Lithic, it's going to be harder to gear your artifacts, and I'll briefly talk about why. So the new Lithic spear has the highest base attack a 4-star weapon can have, which is 44 attack at level 1. Okay, so you can reach the highest attack potential for Hu Tao's kit amongst all the 4-star weapons. On top of that, it has a high attack boost of 53% to 69%. This is from both the substat as well as the weapon effect. So maybe let me just quickly talk about Lithic spear to be fair. Because Lithic spear is new, so not everyone has an idea of how it works, so that's why I thought it's good if I go through it. So Lithic spear is actually going to come together in the banner with Staff of Homa in 2 weeks time. So that's why I have put it here for the comparison as well. Level 80 Lithic spear you get 497 base attack, level 90 you get 565. That's actually very high for a 4-star weapon. And crit rate wise, this is R5. At R5 you can actually get 28% crit rate assuming max stats. Why? Because if you see this point here, it's saying that for every character in the party who heals from Li Yue, the character who equips this weapon gains a 7% attack increase and a 3% crit rate increase. Effect stats up to 4 times. Okay, so this means that you can get 7 times 4, 28% attack increase, as well as 3 times 4, 12% crit rate increase for R1. For R5, you get 11% attack increase times 4, that's 44% attack increase, plus a 7% times 4 crit rate increase, that's 28% crit rate increase, which you see here. And then you can add this attack to the substat that it has. So Lithic spear gives a lot of attack. A lot of attack. Okay? It's really good if you can get max stats. But conversely, because of its high base attack, if you see here at character level 90 with Lithic spear at level 90, your base attack is 671. That's much higher than Deathmatch. That's also higher than Blackcliff pole. But conversely, in return, your max HP required is very high. At level 6 elemental skill, you need 53k. At level 9, you need 45k. This is not easy at all. Right? So this is the HP percentage that's required. Now, let me go back to just the portion here. Let's talk about the CR, CD versus HP Headpiece on R1 Lithic. Okay, the HP percentage requirement is highest amongst the 3 4-star weapons compared here. since the base attack on Lithic is also highest. This actually results in a phenomenon where you are actually unable to hit 400% attack cap without HP, Headpiece, and HP Sense. So I actually recommend HP Headpiece. This is for R1 Lithic. Okay, I recommend HP Headpiece for the 50% CR target. So if I look at the R1 stats itself, this R1 stats, you'll see that when I am at skill level 9, I use a crit damage helmet. I am not able to hit the max attack buff. The max attack buff is 2684. I'm only able to hit 2617. And it gets a lot worse when I'm trying to target 80% CR target, because the HP percentage requirement is so much higher. Because if you want to get 80% CR target, you need to use CR Headpiece. And when you use CR Headpiece, the HP percentage requirement is so high. You need 112% from sub stats, from start stats, guys. On top of that, you also need CR upgrades, you need CD upgrades, and that only leaves you with about 10 for HP percentage upgrade. That's why I say that it's way too far. If you are using R1 Lithic Spear, 80% CR target is a very hard target to meet. It's basically impossible unless you are willing to sacrifice your 400% attack cap, basically. That's the gist of it. So that's the bad thing about R1 Lithic Spear. Okay. Now next, let's talk about the CR CD versus HP Headpiece on R5 Lithic. So first payment is pretty much the same, but because R5 Lithic does gives you a additional crit rate, it means that you have a bit more leeway. You should actually use the HP Headpiece. For target of 50% CR, HP Headpiece is actually better than CD Headpiece, because it gives you more leeway. It's the same scenario that we covered earlier for Blackcliff Pole and Deathmatch, where you need lesser HP percentage upgrades. If you use a CD Headpiece, you're actually going to require 19 upgrades of HP percent. 19, guys, that's 86% of all your upgrades amongst all 5 artifacts must go into HP percentage. That's almost impossible, right? It's almost impossible, seriously. All 19 into HP, the odds of it happening is so low. So that's why you should use double HP. You should use the HP Headpiece so that your artifact rolls are not as restrictive. You still need to get 1 crit rate upgrade, 6 crit damage upgrade, and only, I say that only with double quotes, only 11 HP percentage upgrades. Which, with some luck, is still definitely doable. But that's not the case when it comes to 19 HP percentage upgrade. It's basically not possible, really. Unless your lucks are so heavenly defying that you can get 19 HP percentage upgrades. So that's why I recommend, if you are just targeting 50% CR, you should use a HP Headpiece on R5 Lithic. Okay? Obviously, when you are targeting 80%, you will always have to use the CR or CD Headpiece, right? But like I said, you won't be able to hit the max attack cap if you are using these pieces even on R5 Lithic here, where I'm getting 28% crit rate. So the crit rate requirement is lower, right? You can see here. At level 9, 80%, I need 31.9% from the substats, 63% if I'm using a crit damage helm. If I'm on R5 Lithic, this is actually 16% lower, it's 15.9%. So we have already taken into consideration the R5 Lithic effect, and yet we are still not able to hit the max attack. But that being said, right, if you look at the attack values here, it's still higher than if you were using Blackcliff Pole at max stacks. Why? Because the base attack is very high before your E. Because Lithic Spear gives a lot of attack percentage. Okay? Okay, so now let's talk about the skill levels. I actually covered it a bit, but as I went through, but let's do it in a more structured way. So at skill level 9, The R1 Lithic Spear at max stats actually has 100 attack more than Blackcliff at max stats, but only when you're going for 50% CR instead of 80%. Why? Because with 50% CR, you need lesser CR upgrades compared to say 80%. When the CR provided, because the CR provided by R1 Lithic is only 12% instead of 28%, it's too low. So you need more CR artifact upgrades in order to hit 80% CR, and that requires you to sacrifice your HP percentage upgrades. So that's why when you sacrifice too much of your HP percentage upgrades, the value that you have from your Lithic Spear will drop the attack. So that is where it comes to the next point here. When going for 80% CR on both weapons, R1 Lithic will actually result in a lower attack than Blackcliff on max stats. So R1 Lithic is approximately equals to Blackcliff R5 1 stack or Blackcliff R1 2 stacks. It's roughly equal to this amount. Okay, so that's why I say when you go for 80% CR on Lithic and also on Blackcliff, you'll find that R1 Lithic will actually give you a lower attack. But of course, the Blackcliff max stats is very conditional. It's a lower attack than the Blackcliff max stat, but Blackcliff max stat is very conditional, right? And R1 Lithic is still not doing too badly. It's still equivalent to Blackcliff R5 with 1 stat or Blackcliff R1 with 2 stats. So the better comparison would be this, right? Blackcliff R1 2 stats versus R1 Lithic. So if you think about how conditional Blackcliff is, it's actually not too bad for Lithic Spear, even if you sacrifice your HP percentage. But that's for R1 Lithic, and you need perfect rolls on R1 Lithic. You'll see that all of the level 9 permutation for R1 Lithic, you have 0 green artifact upgrades left here, which means you have no leeway in your artifact upgrades at all. You need your artifact upgrades to go perfectly like this: 5 of them into CR percentage, 11 into crit rate, 6 of them into crit damage. So it's actually very hard to achieve the max 400% attack cap buff on R1 Lithic. But it's still doing more damage than R1 Blackcliff with 1 stack or even no stack. That's the silver lining, I would say. Now, well, let's talk about R5 Lithic next. R5 Lithic actually gives you an additional 16% CR at max stats, so 28%. Which actually means that you can achieve 80% CR with 155% CD, made a typo here, while maintaining the same attack as Blackcliff max stats, which is a huge advantage. Since Blackcliff max stats are not reliable, right? And even if the max attack cap is not 400% is not met, R5 Lithic is still able to match Blackcliff max stats. So in other words, R5 Lithic gives you a very reliable attack buff along with a high CR and high crit damage, provided your artifacts are rolled perfectly. And if you are using C3 Hu Tao, Constellation 3 Hu Tao with skill level 12, you can even get 200 attack more than Blackcliff at max stat, while still achieving 80% CR and a much easier artifact upgrade setup than skill level 9. What do I mean? If I look back at this portion here, this column here, this is skill level 12, 80% CR target using a crit rate headpiece. This is the artifact upgrades. We need 11 of them into HP percentage, which basically this is the exact same kind of target that you want to meet on your level 9 skill with double HP artifacts, means that. So this shows that it's really very comfortable to use R5 Lithic together with C3 Hu Tao. But we all know how expensive C3 Hu Tao is, right? That's why it's not really F2P or L2P. I'm just putting it up here so that you guys know that there's such an option. But if you want to talk about the most practical option to go for, I'll say it's here. Double HP, 50% CR target, and this is the comfortable amount of the artifact upgrades that you can work towards. Not that it's easy, by the way. Only 4 artifacts with leeway is not easy. You actually need your artifact upgrades to go very well, and you will be able to have 4.3k attack. 4.3k attack, guys. That's very high for a 4-star weapon. Very high for a 4-star weapon. So I'll say R5 Lithic is really good, but of course that's only if you are able to get R5 Lithic. R5 Lithic, I'll say it's really a luck dependent kind of thing, right? If you're safe, you must Primogens for Hu Tao. When rolling for Hu Tao, okay, I'm not sure whether the Lithic is available on the character banner. I think it's only available on the weapon banner. So while trying to roll for a Staff of Homa, you might be able to get R5 Lithic. And it will be a viable choice if you're so unlucky that you don't get the Staff of Homa with your limited resources. R5 Lithic, if you are lucky enough to get it while trying to get that, R5 Lithic is actually pretty good. Okay, 80 to 90, this is the standard thing. So you'll see that the attack buff is even better now since the weapon itself gives more attack. So 438 to 492. So that's much better than the traditional attack based characters, right? Okay, so to conclude, Lithic has the highest attack potential. At R1 you can hit 4.2k, at R5 you can hit 4.3k. But bear in mind that although the attack buff is only 100, there's a big difference in how your artifact upgrades can go. This requires absolute perfect ones, while this has a bit of leeway. Okay, so Lithic is really the hardest to build for in terms of artifacts. Lithic R1 actually falls slightly behind Blackcliff if you are targeting 18% CR, but it's actually better than Blackcliff with 50% CR. R5 Lithic is significantly better than Blackcliff for both 50% and 80% CR targets. But the caveat here is that Lithic requires almost perfect base rolls and perfect artifact upgrades into only HP percentage or CR percentage, which honestly speaking is extremely difficult to achieve. And we're talking about perfect in terms of type, not value. I'm still using the average value as a guide. If I use the perfect value as a guide, I don't think it is achievable at all, right? Okay, so especially for 80% CR, you need super perfect rolls. For 50% CR, you have some leeway, but not much. R5 Lithic will give you more leeway than R1. Okay, so to conclude, right, basically Lithic is your best option. You can hit the highest attack potential, 4000 plus. Almost 1000 better than Deathmatch, right? 1000 better than R1 Deathmatch. Yeah, almost 1000 better than R1 Deathmatch if I compare R1 to R1. So Lithic really requires some work. And if you do have some really well-rolled artifacts, well-upgraded artifacts, Lithic is definitely an option to go for. Right? So now let's talk about the overall conclusions. I'm sorry the video has gone on for so long. If I didn't touch on the base attack versus sense, probably the video would have been a more acceptable duration. But unfortunately, we have so much content to cover, and I'm already speaking as fast as I can. Okay, so base attack is very important for Hu Tao. That's the overall conclusion. Because I would say that it's more important than substats amongst the weapons. They are already giving CR, CD, or HP percentage as substats. Because of how her kit works, it's always a times 5 of her base attack or a plus 400% of her base attack. So base attack of the weapon actually becomes very important here for Hu Tao. Leveling Hu Tao and her weapon to 19 grants a lot more attack, I just mentioned this 5 times, than other attack based character. But if you look at the general comparison of 70 to 80 versus 80 to 90, it remains the same for Hu Tao, right? So ultimately, I would say it's a player's decision. I will personally go for it myself because 1. 5S the usual attack is good. 2. I like the character design. 3. I like the Japanese VA. Explosion. If you guys know what this is referring to Megumin from the Konosuba. It's really funny wherever she says explosion. It's the same voice actor, by the way. It's really funny wherever she says explosion in the Japanese kind of accent. So yeah, I like that. So I'm definitely going to go for 90 on Hu Tao and weapon on to 90 on Hu Tao. I still need to find a lot of resources, by the way, for that. And next thing is that skill level is very important for Hu Tao. The recommended level I would say is 9. Because only Deathmatch can hit 400% attack cap on level 6. And her C3 is also really good in this case. Now, the most important part of this video, I guess, would be the worst to best ranking of the 4-star weapons here being compared. Worst off, I would say, is Deathmatch. The middle is Blackcliff Pole. The best is Lithic Spear. But this ranking is also directly proportional to how difficult the artifact requirements are. The better the weapon overall attack here meaning the final one, the few thousand attack kind of value, the harder the artifact requirements. So generally speaking, I would recommend Lithic for L2P players, Blackcliff for F2P players who are generally lucky with artifact upgrades. If you have terrible luck, it will be much easier to use Deathmatch, but bear in mind you are taking a weapon with low attack potential. But there's a slight caveat to Deathmatch, because if you end up lucky in future and you get a much higher number of HP percentage artifact upgrades, about 10 more than the required, you can actually afford to use attack percentage sense for more attack, assuming the 400% attack is already met, which is doable because Deathmatch HP percentage requirements are the lowest. So you can actually bring Deathmatch to almost on par with Blackcliff for the same refinement level. So previously, Blackcliff at R1 was doing about the same attack as Deathmatch at R5. If you have good enough HP percentage upgrades such that you can afford to use an attack percentage sense instead of a HP sense, you can actually bring the Deathmatch R1 to on par with R1 Blackcliff. But conversely, I can also say that if I get the same number of HP percentage artifacts upgrade, it will also allow me to use better weapons like Blackcliff and Lithic. That's true, but don't forget that if you have started with Deathmatch, you have already pumped resources into Deathmatch itself. At least this is like a route of progression for you. You go with Deathmatch with a lower attack potential first, and slowly build your way up such that you get an attack percentage sense to allow it to match Blackcliff R1 at least. So there is a slight positive note about using Deathmatch here. But generally speaking, I'll say it's Deathmatch the worst, followed by Blackcliff pole, and the best being Lithic Spear, but the hardest in terms of the artifact upgrades. Alright, so that's the conclusion in terms of weapon comparison as well as the general observations for Hu Tao's kit. In terms of her base attack, how important it is for her character level, weapon level, skill level, and weapon ranking. I have some other points to note. I know the video has already reached an hour. Bear with me, I'm almost done. Okay, so first off, the whole reason why I'm doing this video right now is because I want to let people know that you have to start farming pyro artifacts for her, and I'll talk shortly about the artifact builds as well. You need to try to get HP sense and HP headpiece with high crit rolls or with high crit rolls, or CR CD headpieces with very high HP percentage and CR rolls. It's really not easy, by the way. I've been farming for artifacts for like 1 week. I think I only have like 2 usable ones, not even perfect or great, just 2 usable ones. And whether or not you need a CR or CD headpiece really depends on the weapon. If you already have a CD weapon, obviously you don't want a CD headpiece, right? But ultimately, it's still up to RNGs itself to decide how your drops will be like from the artifact farming, right? But the important note is that even with such artifacts roll for other characters, right, they will typically still be about 1000 to 1500 attack less than Hu Tao during her E. Right? Even if the artifacts are not perfectly rolled, but you still achieve 50% CR, her attack will still be 1000 plus higher than the other characters using the same artifacts, mainly because of how her E works. So that's why I would say Hu Tao is insanely good. Hu Tao is really good. Try to farm for artifacts right now. Start to farm for them right now. You have 2 weeks time to farm for them. If you're lucky, you might be able to get workable artifacts to really utilize her kit. Now, let's talk about artifact builds next. I actually think 4 Witch is better than 2 Witch, 2 Glads. Typically, most characters, other than the loot pyro characters, you will say go for 2 Witch, 2 Glads, right? Oh, and maybe banded 4 Witch is better. So 2 Witch, 2 Glads, right? For the 18% attack from 2 Glads, it actually gives you a very little buff for Hu Tao. Because number 1, her base attack is very low. Her character base attack is very low. Number 2, because of how much attack her E adds, right? In comparison over the overall 4k plus, 3k plus attack, you only get like 2.7% effective increase on a character level 90, Lithic level 90 R5. And only a very measly 2.9% effective increase on a character level 80, Deathmatch 80 R1 weapon. Whereas for a 4-piece Witch set, just 1 stack of the effect from the 4-piece Witch set, that's 7.5% pyro damage, right? That gives you about 5.1% effective increase, assuming you are using a Pyro plus 20 card. So 5.1% is easily almost double of the 18% attack from Glads. Obviously, this is a very simple estimate or calculation on how much the damage buff we get between the Witch set 1 stat as well as 80% attack. Because don't forget that the Witch set also increases overloaded damage, increases melt damage, increases vaporized damage, right? So that's why I say the 4 Witch is actually better than the 2 Witch 2 Glad. Lava Walker, I really want Lava Walker to work for Hu Tao, but Lava Walker is very dependent. Because if you are using a elemental reaction Hu Tao, your pyro effect is going to be removed every time there's an elemental reaction, and then your 35% buff doesn't work from the Lava Walker 4-piece effect, because the 4-piece Lava Walker effect is when the enemy is affected by pyro, you get 35% increased damage regardless of what you are using against them. And for Hu Tao, it's not so bad because during her E, all her attacks are pyro attacks, and they cannot be overwritten by any other infusion. So let's say if she's in Chong Yun's aerial effect, she still will be doing pyro damage. So in a sense, I guess she does have a very consistent application of pyro onto the opponent. But you still stem from the same problem where whenever you have an elemental reaction, it's removed. So you get a 35% boost on an elemental reaction, it gets removed. Your next hit, you don't get the 35% boost. Your next hit after that, then you get the 35% boost. So it doesn't feel that great, right? But honestly speaking, without testing it out for Hu Tao, I think it's hard to say whether or not 4-piece Lava Walker will be better than 4-piece Witch set. So what I will conclude or advise is, rather than focusing on the set, focus on the stats, right? Because the stats are so hard to get. Hu Tao artifacts rolls are really difficult, right? So depending on which rolls you get on which set, use that accordingly. I'll say interuse it between these 3 sets. It's really more important to get the roll and the stats correct rather than the set effect. I mean, set effect is definitely nice and very effective, but on Hu Tao, where you want to get her max attack cap, I'll say even a well-rolled Lava Walker will still work very well, right? Because it's so hard to get her artifact stats correct. And another advice I can give is target 50% CR first instead of 80%, so they can slowly improve on it. I know I have been talking about 50% and 80%, but target 50% first. 80% is like the ideal kind of end game state where your character is like completely completed. It's a target to work towards to, not a target to start with. Right? Not on day 1 on Hu Tao you'll be able to get it. Even if you're farming for her artifact starting from now for 2 weeks in a row. Because don't forget, you still need to farm for her other materials. Now, other than me just doing the ranking just now, I thought I wanted to show the attack range itself. So attack range itself per weapon is really ranging from character level 18, weapon level 80 R1 to character level 19, weapon 90 R5 with max stats if there's any stat concept for the weapon. And in the case of Lithic Spear, I actually included C3 Hu Tao as well, because like I said, Lithic Spear is kinda low to pay. I guess lucky characters may be able to get C3 Hu Tao, but it's really crossing to the domain of pay to win really. Okay, so Deathmatch is about 3029 attack to 3520 attack after using her E. Blackcliff Pole is 3162 to 3959, so it 56. But this is very conditional on the stacks. So a more realistic representation I would say is like 3.6 to 3.7k as its highest attack value. Lithic Spear, there's also extreme artifact requirements required to hit 4.3k, but the fact that it can hit 4.3k is mind-boggling, right? It ranges from 3.3k basically to 4.3k. So that's why I say Lithic Spear is actually the best spear if you can get the artifact requirements, but it's tough. It's really tough, I have to acknowledge that. But the weapon in itself is a good weapon to invest in, because if you see the trend of characters coming out, there's a lot of pole arm characters coming out, so Lithic Spear will be very useful for your comp. and there will be more Liu characters coming out as well. So that will help. So some almost last tips. I just have this session and one last session to go through. So some general tips, right? 9 CR upgrades are equivalent to actually about approximately 10% CR per artifact. So it's not easy, although it sounds easy on paper, right? Can you imagine 19 HP percentage upgrade that we were talking about earlier? How much more you need? It's insane. It's really, really insane. Okay? So one important thing to note is to farm and save your Shards of Foul Legacy, because that's the boss talent material she needs in order to upgrade her elemental skill to level 9. Right now, the only characters who use Shards of Foul Legacy is Chow and Diona. So if you don't really have these two characters, you should have enough Shards of Foul Legacy to upgrade her elemental skill to level 9. I myself, I'm using both these characters, and I have been saving her Shards of Foul Legacy. I don't have enough for level 9 right now, I'm one off, but I still have 2 weeks left, right? So fingers crossed, hopefully we can get it. And you should also farm her talents, ascension, and weapon materials, which essentially she needs the same materials as Xiao in terms of the new boss, the Primo Jovishap. You need that material. You need the red character ascension gems, which is from the Pyro boss. Weapon materials, you need Whopper Flower Nectar. You need a lot of it, because even her talent requires it as well. Oh, sorry, not weapon materials, her ascension materials. Her ascension materials and her talent materials both require Whopper Flower. So please go slaughter all those Whopper Flowers, because you need a lot of them, especially if you're using Ganyu, because Ganyu will have used those as well. Okay, weapon materials, if I don't remember wrongly, is Aerocidite for the Staff of Homa. Okay, so one last special mention. Black Tesser, the 3-star weapon that gives you HP percentage. The base attack is too low. It's so low such that I'll say that the HP percentage requirement for using it is so low. So the HP percentage it gives a subset is actually useless. You don't even need that HP percentage subset because your base attack is way too low. So the attack cap of 400% based on Black Tesser is also too low to be effective. So you don't even need to consider Black Tesser. Okay. So before I end this video, let's just have one last look at the HP percentage required and the number of upgrades required, assuming HP percentage roll on each artifact, the base roll. So at least you have a case of reference, basis of reference, right? Okay, so this is for character level 80, Deathmatch 80, as you can see here, Deathmatch, weapon level 80, character level 80. You need this amount of HP percentage based on the CR target as well as the skill level here. Okay, and this translates to the number of upgrades you need from your artifact upgrades to go into this. If you need this for reference in future, feel free to pause the video, yeah. Again, although I assume all of these rows base rows being present, if they are not, you simply add one more to the upgrade itself. If the base row is not there on, say, your feather, then you will need one more upgrade here. Instead of 9, you need 10. That's as simple as it gets. Okay. This is for level 80, character level 80, deathmatch level 80. Maybe if you prefer to look at the max HP required, these are the max HP figures that you need to work towards too. Although I think knowing this is much better, along with what sense or headpiece you should be using. This is for character level 90, deathmatch level 90. These are the HP that you need, using this different permutation of the headpieces. And these are the upgrades that you need. Alright, and this is the attack that you can achieve, whether it's R1 or R5, two different effects. This is Battle Pass, oh sorry, not Battle Pass, Blackcliff pole. Sorry, because everyone says BP as Battle Pass, right? So that was my first thought as well. So this is Blackcliff pole, level 80, weapon level 90. This is the stats that you can get from it. So rather, these are the stats that you need. You need this amount of HP percentage for this skill level and this CR target. Crit damage is constant 155% crit damage across all my weapon comparisons. Okay, these are the artifact upgrades that you need and those in pink are those where you can't reach the 400% attack cap, even with the perfect rolls. Alright? Base attack, these are the values that you can get from Blackcliff poll, whether it's R5 max stats or R1 max stats. Next up, we have the character level 19, Blackcliff poll level 19. Okay. HP percentage required is here just from the substat alone, based on the different permutation here for the sense and the Headpiece min stat. And again, skill level 9, 50% CR target, 80% CR target. For the rest of weapons, I'll probably not be repeating the same thing. You guys know what to look at, yeah, by now. So number of artifact upgrades required here. This is the base attack. Or sorry, not the base attack. This is the overall attack you can get. Very nice for Blackcliff pole, although very conditional on the max stats. Alright. This is Lithic R1, character level 18, weapon level 18. These are the stats. Okay. I'll just stop here for people to catch up on. This should be good enough for people to pause, right? Yeah. Alright, then the next one is character level 19, Lithic 19, R1. Okay. Permutation, substats required, which translates to the artifacts upgrade required, as well as how many of them are unable to hit the 400% attack cap. Next up, we have R5, character level 18, weapon level 18 for Lithic Spear. Again, the min stat, the substats, the upgrades required, and the final stats. Okay. Lastly, we have the Lithic Spear here with character level 19, weapon level 19, and refinement 5. So same thing, artifacts, artifact substats, artifact upgrades, as well as final stats. Very nice for Lithic Spear, I would say, if you can achieve it. Or probably this is the one to go for, yeah, for Lithic Spear. With double HP Headpiece. So I hope you find the very long video guide helpful, because I'm sorry that it took so long. There's really a lot for me to cover. I could have easily done and split the video into one weapon each, right? But I thought that wouldn't give a proper view, so that's why I decided to do such a long video. And I thank you for your patience in watching. I hope that the content has been very helpful to you so far. At least I find it very helpful for myself, even when I'm doing out this guide itself. I find myself referencing to this while I'm farming and doing upgrades on my artifacts actually. So I hope you guys, this can be, the same can be said for you as well. Okay, so thanks everyone for watching. I'll see you guys next video. Next video I'll probably do the one on Homa, stuff for Homa. And let me know in the comments if there's any other 4-star weapons or 5-star weapons that you want me to do such a similar analysis on. And I'll be happy to do so. Just let me know. Alright, thanks everyone for watching. If you like the content, remember to like the video and click subscribe for more. Bye!